This wasn't a snap, and it definitely wasn't some quiet Hollywood tragedy, because according to multiple reports, a famous director's son, Nick Reiner, was allegedly spiraling right in front of people, weeks after a serious mental health diagnosis, hours after a public blow-up at an A-list party, and just before investigators say 2 people were found dead inside their own mansion. But here's something that makes this story even more complicated. Nick Reiner is one of Rob and Michelle Reiner's 3 children. He's 32 years old. In 2016, he told people that he struggled with addiction since he was just 15. Despite growing up with incredible wealth, Nick said he spent time homeless in Maine, New Jersey, and Texas. Even during moments of sobriety, he admitted battling a pull back to his old life. He shared this story 7 years ago on a podcast called Dopey, an episode that's still public on YouTube.
What ended your sober run?
I don't know. I just didn't want to be away from home, and I just wanted to come back home.
But you also wanted to get back to smoking weed and whatever. I'm not judging you, Nick. I'm just like the show. Like there's there's thousands.
You know what it really was?
What?
You know what it really was? It was like I kind of knew that I wanted to relapse, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even want to call it a relapse. I just wanted to get back to my old life of like smoking weed, kind of taking some pills, like doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I started to do it back in Maine, I wouldn't really be able to do it.
Think about that for a second. Wealth, fame, and opportunity, yet a young man fighting demons in every corner of his life. Tonight, we're breaking down 7 disturbing details prosecutors can't ignore, including a hotel room reportedly covered in blood, movements that don't line up with a total breakdown, and a legal twist that could decide whether this case is treated as a mental health collapse or first-degree murder. Stay until the end, because the final detail doesn't just raise questions, it completely reframes this case. And fair warning, the deeper you go, the darker this gets. 1. The timing of the diagnosis. Let's start with the detail that made people stop in their tracks. According to TMZ, Nick Reiner was reportedly diagnosed with schizophrenia just weeks before the alleged killings. Not years ago, not quietly documented over time. Weeks. That timing matters more than people realize. A diagnosis like this doesn't just come with a label. It usually comes with medication changes, side effects, trial and error, and emotional instability. And yet, nothing in the days leading up suggests things were slowing down. Life didn't pause. There was no step back, no reported supervision, no visible safety net kicking in. Instead, things appeared to have kept moving forward almost like normal. Public events, social settings, high-pressure environments. So here's the uncomfortable question prosecutors are quietly asking. If someone was allegedly struggling badly enough to receive that diagnosis weeks before, why was life still treated like business as usual? Because that doesn't look like caution. It doesn't look like intervention. It looks like escalation. And once you see that pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. 2. The A-list party incident. Now let's talk about the decision that, in hindsight, looks absolutely wild. According to The Hollywood Reporter and multiple other outlets, Nick attended a high-profile holiday party at Conan O'Brien's house with his parents just hours before everything allegedly went wrong. This wasn't a low-key get-together. This wasn't a family dinner where things could stay contained. This was an industry party, full of writers, producers, executives, people who notice things for a living. And multiple reports say Nick's behavior immediately stood out. Guests allegedly felt uneasy around him. Some people reportedly didn't even realize who he was. A few thought he didn't belong there at all. Let that sink in. At a party hosted by Conan O'Brien, people thought this guy might have wandered in off the street. That's not quirky. That's not misunderstood genius energy. That's alarm bell behavior. And here's why this matters so much. This wasn't happening in private, behind closed doors where families can rationalize things away. This was in public, in front of industry insiders who have no reason to sugarcoat what they saw. So ask yourself this: if strangers noticed something was seriously off, what was the situation like when the doors closed and it was just family? Because whatever tension existed that night didn't stay at the party. According to reports, something happened there. Something witnesses say changed the energy completely. And that brings us to the moment that shifted everything. 3. The public argument with Rob Reiner. This is the moment everyone keeps circling back to. According to multiple outlets, Nick and Rob Reiner got into a heated argument at that party. And no, this wasn't a quiet disagreement in the corner. This wasn't a quick whisper and move on. People noticed it. People remembered it, which tells you everything you need to know. Because at an A-list Hollywood party, you don't stand out unless something is seriously off. Now here's why this matters legally. Prosecutors don't need to prove Nick planned anything days or weeks in advance. They don't need a manifesto. They don't need a long paper trail. All they have to show is that intent formed at some point before the act. And an argument like this, public, emotional, and unresolved, becomes a very convenient anchor in the timeline. Not proof, but a turning point. Especially when you look at what it allegedly happened next, because this wasn't followed by cooling off. It wasn't followed by distance or de-escalation. According to reports, hours later, both parents were found dead. And that's the moment the story stops feeling like a family tension issue and starts feeling genuinely disturbing. Because once you connect the argument to what allegedly followed, you're no longer asking if something snapped, you're asking when. And that question leads straight into the next disturbing detail, the one investigators are watching the closest. It's unclear what Nick Reiner actually did for work. He co-wrote a movie with his dad, Being Charlie, released in 2015. After that, he seems to have largely disappeared from show business. We did find a YouTube video Nick posted 9 years ago, possibly an attempt to create a character and break into acting.
And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally, because I'm a snail and I'm never gonna fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
This gap in his professional life raises questions about his stability and what was going on behind the scenes in the years leading up to this tragedy. 4. The hotel room discovery. Hours after leaving that A-list party, reports say Nick checked into a hotel in Santa Monica. Sounds normal, right? Until TMZ dropped the next line. The room was found covered in blood. Let me repeat that. Covered. Not a little smear, not a single trace. Covered. And here's where it gets weird. Staff reportedly said Nick didn't appear injured at all when he checked in. No scratches, no bruises, no signs he'd been in a struggle. So investigators are left asking the question everyone watching this case is asking. Where did that blood come from? And perhaps even more chilling, why was it there? Because this isn't just about what happened in the mansion, it's about what happened after. Every step, every move after a violent act becomes crucial in a first-degree murder investigation. A hotel room like that doesn't just tell a story of violence, it tells a story of movement, calculation, and timing. And that timing leads directly into the next disturbing detail, the one that explains just how chaotic the night really was. 5. Movement after the alleged incident. Here's where things get even more uncomfortable. Prosecutors often look closely at what someone does after a violent act, because behavior after the fact can speak volumes. According to reports, Nick didn't freeze. He didn't stay at the family home in shock. He didn't call for help. He didn't disappear into confusion. He moved. from the party to the Reiner mansion to a hotel and then reportedly elsewhere. Every step shows a level of organization, checking in, paying bills, leaving. And that, legally, is huge. Because total mental collapse usually looks chaotic, messy, frozen. This doesn't. Now, let's be clear. Mobility doesn't prove guilt on its own, but it absolutely complicates a defense that hinges on complete incapacity. And if you think that's unsettling, just wait, because the next detail peels back another layer of what may have been happening behind closed doors. 6. Arrest footage and court appearance. Now let's talk about the arrest. Local media later obtained surveillance footage seeing Nick calmly buying a drink at a gas station just before officers moved in. No panic, no visible distress, no hint of someone unraveling. Alone, that footage doesn't prove anything. It could be a million things. But when you start connecting the dots, it becomes something much more chilling. A recent mental health diagnosis, a public blow-up at an A-list party, a blood-covered hotel room, hours of purposeful movement. Alone, each moment is a piece. Together, it paints a pattern, a timeline prosecutors will scrutinize. And that brings us to the final detail, the one that could change the entire trajectory of this case, for both defense and prosecution. You won't want to miss this last piece. It rewrites everything we thought we knew. Nick's siblings didn't mention him in their public statement, which read in part per CBS News, "Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day." The horrific and devastating loss of our parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, is something that no one should ever experience. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends. Nick hasn't entered a plea yet. His attorney, Alan Jackson, requested more time before an official arraignment. When asked if he was waiving his right to a speedy trial, Nick spoke 3 words: "Yes, Your Honor."
Mr. Reiner, you have a constitutional and statutory right to speedy arraignment. Your counsel is requesting that your arraignment be continued to January 7, 2026. Do you waive your right to a speedy arraignment so that your arraignment can be heard on January 7, 2026?
Courtroom sketches show him in a blue vest, often worn to prevent self-harm. Jackson later commented on the case, highlighting the difficulty of balancing legal strategy with mental health considerations.
A couple of quick words. First of all, and most importantly, this is a devastating tragedy that has befallen the Reiner family. We all recognize that. Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. These need to be thoroughly but very carefully dealt with and examined and looked at and analyzed. We ask that in the process you allow the system to move forward in the way that it was designed to move forward, not with a rush to judgment, not with jumping to conclusions, but with restraint and with dignity and with the respect that this system and this process deserves and that the family deserves. So with that, we are set for January 7th for an arraignment. That's the next court date. And that's all I have to say at this point. There may be more at some other point, but today we're going to rest on where we stand procedurally, which is this was a continuance of arraignment. Nothing happened today substantively. We'll be back for an arraignment in the same department on the 7th of January. We'll see you then.
7. Legal strategy and the Slayer statute. Now we get to the detail that adds a whole new layer of tension to this case. Nick Reiner retained Alan Jackson, one of the most high-powered and expensive criminal defense attorneys in the country, the same attorney who defended Kevin Spacey, the same one who handled Karen Reed. Why does that matter? Because money and the law always speak loudly in a courtroom. See, California has a law called the Slayer statute. It's simple. If you're convicted of killing someone, you cannot inherit from their estate. And Rob Reiner's estate, widely reported to be worth tens of millions, maybe even hundreds. So timing isn't just a detail here, it's potentially a legal game changer. Because if a conviction happens, any inheritance disappears. Poof, gone. Which leads to a quiet but critical question every prosecutor and every jury will notice. Who's funding this defense right now? No accusations, no claims, just a question that hovers over everything. A question that could subtly shape perception in ways you might not even notice. And that, right there, is the last piece of this dark, twisted puzzle. Right now, Nick Reiner hasn't entered a plea, and this case is still in its very early stages. Nothing here has been proven in court. But the timeline, the behavior, the questions that keep piling up, they make it impossible for this story to quietly fade away. Because this isn't just about what happened, it's about when intent might have formed, and whether mental illness explains everything or only part of it. If you want to stay on top of every twist in this case, share this video, subscribe for updates, and dive into our full playlist on Hollywood's darkest legal scandals. Trust me, this story is far from over.